After Adam died, I moved to a small cottage near the river in Vermont. The move wasn't dramatic. I didn't tell many people. I packed slowly over several weeks, choosing what to bring and what to leave behind. Most things were left. What came with me fit in the back of Nate's old station wagon, though he never offered to drive. I hired someone instead. He was quiet, wore a green flannel shirt, and helped lift the boxes without comment. The cottage sat low against the landscape, tucked between birch and pine. From the porch, you could see the water move like breath, slow, wide, unhurried. The house itself had creaking floors and a draft in the east window. Still, it was peaceful. The neighbors were kind in the way rural people often are, indirect, generous. Sometimes I'd find a jar of jam or a slice of homemade pie wrapped in foil on the steps. Once, someone left a hand-knitted dishcloth with no note. My days followed a gentle rhythm. I rose early, usually before the light broke fully through the trees. The paper was delivered by 7 o'clock, always folded clean. I'd sit at the kitchen table with a latte, no sugar, and read it front to back, though I often forgot the headlines by noon. Then I'd water the plants, most of them still in their pots from the nursery, and walk to the corner cafe. They knew my order. I never had to say it. Latte, no sugar, and sometimes a small croissant if they hadn't sold out. I didn't expect much more. After 63 years, I'd come to understand that peace isn't about abundance. It's about the absence of demands. That's what the river taught me, its stillness felt earned. Nate lived 2 hours away in a busier town. He and Clara had bought a townhouse with pale blue shutters and a yard too small for a garden. They didn't visit often. At first, they came once a month, sometimes twice. Then the gaps lengthened. I didn't ask why. I told myself they were busy, that young people have their own lives, their own pacing. I understood. But something shifted. I couldn't say when. It wasn't dramatic, not really. Just a slow tapering off. Messages went unanswered. Clara stopped picking up my calls. Even when I left short ones. Even when I only asked, "Are you coming for lunch this Sunday?" My messages were light. Breezy. I never pushed. I never said, "Please." But they hung there, unseen or ignored. I stopped sending them eventually. There's something undignified about talking into silence. I tried to explain it away. Maybe she was tired. Maybe Nate was swamped with work. Maybe nothing was wrong at all. But even in that silence, there was something sharp. Something that hummed under the skin like static. I felt it most in the late afternoons, when the light turned gold through the pines and the cottage was quiet except for the hum of the fridge. I'd reach for my cup, now cold, and realize no one was coming. The first sign came at Christmas. They invited me, with caveats. "If it's convenient," Clara said, like I might be a burden. "There's not really room for you to stay, though," Nate added, not quite meeting my eyes. So I booked a hotel. First time in years. The lobby smelled like lemon cleaner and damp coats. My room overlooked the parking lot. I wrapped my gifts carefully, ribboned boxes of things they'd mentioned months ago. They stayed unopened on the coffee table. I offered to help with a friend's wedding in the spring. "I could bake the cake, if you'd like," I said. Clara smiled, polite but tight. "Oh Linda, that's sweet, but we've already got everything covered." At the dinner, they placed me next to a woman who raised parrots and across from someone who didn't speak to me at all. I ate slowly, folding my napkin with care. And that's when it settled in me, a knowing, not sudden but whole. I wasn't being asked. I was being managed. And beneath all of it, something in me began to shift. Quietly. Steadily. Like the river in winter, slow, cold, and certain. After Christmas, I stopped offering. That was my first quiet change. No more suggestions, no more polite nudges. I waited instead, to be invited, to be needed. Neither came. Spring brought longer days and early crocus blooms, and with them, a silence that deepened like water. I still sent birthday cards. I still mailed a parcel at Easter, chocolate eggs wrapped in soft tissue, a lavender sachet for Clara, a gardening book for Nate. No response came. Not even a thank you text. I told myself I didn't mind. But something in me began tracking these silences like missed heartbeats. By summer, Clara was posting pictures online, brunches, vacations, barbecues with friends, all full of color and laughter, none of which included me. I saw one photo taken at a lakeside picnic, Nate in sunglasses, Clara holding a tray of sangria. I recognized the blanket. I had given it to them their first Christmas together. A softwool tartan, stitched at the corners. They'd said they loved it. That was the last time I saw it, until that photo. No one had mentioned the picnic. I clicked off the screen and sat very still in the cottage. The afternoon light shifted on the wall, outlining the fern I hadn't repotted since April. The silence inside me didn't scream. It settled, like dust on glass. That August, I was invited to a dinner party Clara was hosting for her colleagues. The invitation came through Nate, brief and offhand. "If you're free. Clara thought you might want to join." When I arrived, the front door was ajar. I stepped in quietly, the way I always did, and waited in the foyer for someone to greet me. It was 5 full minutes before anyone noticed. Clara gave me a quick hug, light and sideways. She was already in hostess mode, all smiles and wine refills. Nate waved from across the room but didn't walk over. I brought a lemon tart. Clara accepted it with a quick nod. "Lovely, thank you, Linda. Just leave it in the kitchen." Her tone was tight, her smile thinner than usual. I placed it carefully on the counter, next to 2 others. Neither homemade. Both untouched. The guests were mostly work friends, voices I didn't recognize, laughter pitched higher than comfort. When we sat down to eat, I found myself at the far end of the table, next to a man named Peter who sold insurance and spent the evening scrolling through his phone. Across from me sat a young woman with perfect hair who didn't once look in my direction. There was no place card with my name. Just an extra chair. Clara floated from end to end, refilling glasses. Nate laughed loudly at something 3 seats away. I cut my chicken slowly, barely tasted it. Someone asked if I was one of the neighbors. I said no, and that was the end of that. The tart was never served. After dinner, I offered to help clean up. "Oh, no need," Clara said brightly. "We've got it all covered." I stood in the doorway of their kitchen, watching her scrape plates while Nate loaded the dishwasher. I knew that routine. I had lived that rhythm for decades, the quiet domestic ballet after guests left. Now, I was background. A blurred figure on the edge of their evening. As I stepped back into the hallway, I noticed a framed print I hadn't seen before. It hung where my watercolor of the harbor used to be, the one I gave them when they moved in. I wondered where it had gone. I left without saying goodbye. No one stopped me. Back home, I reheated tea I hadn't finished from the morning and sat by the window until the moon came up over the pines. I didn't cry. That part of me felt long sealed. But something inside me, a small, steady part, hardened just a little more. I began noticing patterns. When I texted Nate, the replies came shorter. Sometimes not at all. When I asked if they needed anything, help with the garden, errands, Clara's upcoming birthday, I was told gently, firmly, no. When I offered to babysit for a friend's wedding, Clara hesitated, then smiled and said, "Oh Linda, that's sweet, but we've already got everything covered." Always that phrase. Sweet. Like a pat on the head. Like a lid being screwed on. At another dinner, this one smaller, more formal, I was seated between 2 strangers. Nate and Clara were at the other end. Every so often, someone would raise a toast. None were directed my way. That's when it truly landed. I wasn't being excluded. I was being placed. Positioned. Managed. Every interaction was soft. polite. And yet it felt like being folded up, the way one puts away a guest towel. Smoothed flat. Out of sight. Even kindness, when calculated, can feel like cruelty. When I got home that evening, I lit a candle in the kitchen and stood watching its flicker. The flame wavered against the wall, long and still. There was nothing left to offer. And no one waiting to receive it. It was a Tuesday. Gray light filtered through the pine trees, casting long shadows across the gravel road outside. The kind of day where nothing sharp happens, just a slow unfolding. That's when the message came. From Nate. Come by this weekend if you're free. Just to talk. Clara's out with friends. I read it twice. My fingers hovered above the screen. Then I typed, of course. I didn't ask what it was about. I didn't ask why Clara wouldn't be there. I said yes because that's what I had always done. Saturday arrived soft and cold. I wrapped the oatmeal cookies in wax paper and packed them in the tin Adam used to bring to church picnics. I added a small stack of photographs, ones from Nate's childhood, ones I thought he might want. Him on the beach with Adam, him in his scout uniform grinning crookedly, a photo of all three of us on the porch of our old house. I tied them with twine. The drive to their home took just under 2 hours. The roads were dry, the sky undecided. Somewhere between winter and spring. When I arrived, the porch light was already on, though the sun hadn't yet begun to set. The house looked quiet. Trim hedges. A blue recycling bin at the curb. Nate opened the door quickly, gave me a brief hug, said, "Come in." There was a smell of something recent, coffee, maybe. Or wine. In the dining room, the table was set. 2 plates. No food. A bottle of wine already open, 2 glasses poured. The tin of cookies felt suddenly old-fashioned in my hands. I placed it gently beside one of the glasses. There was also a stack of papers on the table. Not thick. Neatly clipped. A blue pen placed diagonally on top. Nate gestured toward the chair. I sat. The silence between us was tight. He spoke softly, like someone easing into a cold pool. So, this is just precautionary. Standard stuff. In case something ever happens. I didn't say anything. He slid the stack of papers toward me. I unfolded the first page. Words I recognized from my nursing days: durable, agent, authority, irrevocable. I turned another page. Real estate. Medical decisions. Access to funds. No oversight. No expiration. Nothing to worry about, Nate said. Just to keep things smooth. I nodded, just once. Reached for the pen. Clicked it. Then set it down. I'll take them home, I said. Review them properly. His smile faltered, then quickly reset. Sure. Of course. No rush. He sipped his wine. I didn't touch mine. We talked of other things after that. A neighbor who'd put up new siding. Clara's upcoming trip. A new phone he was thinking of buying. I watched his face. He looked tired. Or maybe just elsewhere. When I stood to leave, he hugged me again. Briefly. No pressure in the arms. I noticed he didn't mention the cookies. In the car, I placed the papers on the passenger seat, buckled them in. The drive back was quiet. My hands gripped the wheel a little too tightly. Somewhere around the halfway mark, my phone vibrated with a new message. I pulled into a gas station lot and checked it. From Clara. We respect you, Linda, but going forward, please don't come by unannounced. This is our home now. I didn't respond. The cold from the message felt physical. My fingers curled inwards, as though to protect themselves. It wasn't the request that hurt. It was the word "our." The sharpness of the border she'd drawn. The door, now visibly closed. She banned me from the house. No argument. No explanation. Just a lock in the form of a sentence. I sat there a long while. Cars came and went. Someone scraped ice from a windshield nearby. Inside the station, a man argued quietly over the price of cigarettes. Eventually, I drove home. The cottage was just as I left it. A lamp still on in the front room. The teacup from that morning, untouched. I placed the papers on the kitchen counter, next to the tin of uneaten cookies I had brought back. Then I walked down to the basement. The air was damp with age. The stairs creaked under my weight. At the far end, behind a wooden chest and a spare winter tire, was the drawer Adam had once pointed to and said, "If anything ever happens, check there." I had never opened it. Until then. The drawer slid out stiffly. Inside, everything was labeled. Bank statements. Legal papers. A small black notebook with my name written in his hand. And a single envelope. Linda, it read. I sat on the cement floor and opened it carefully. His handwriting was shaky but clear. "Don't trust too easily," he had written. "Not because people don't love you, but because money changes what love means." There were documents. A trust. Multiple accounts. A breakdown of investments I had never seen. All in my name. Over $6 million. Hidden away. Protected. Untouched. I ran my fingers over the paper. I didn't cry. I didn't feel triumphant. Just quiet. As if some final piece had clicked into place. Adam had seen it before I did. He had left me not wealth, but a safeguard. A way to remain unclaimed. A way to choose. I sat there a long while. In that dark, unfinished room. The letter in my lap. The cold pressing gently against my spine. Above me, the house stood still. And I knew, I would not be signing Nate's papers. The next morning, I didn't cry. I made tea. Earl Grey, no sugar. The steam curled against the rim of the cup, then faded. I drank it slowly, not for comfort but for clarity. I didn't want to move quickly. I wanted to feel every part of the silence. Then I walked to the back of the cottage and opened the windows, one by one. The air was cold. The kind of clean cold that clears the throat, sharpens the spine. I stood for a while at the sink, staring out at the river. The way it moved, indifferent, assured, reminded me of something I used to know. Before marriage, before motherhood. A kind of self I hadn't touched in decades. I brought the documents upstairs from the basement, laid them out on the kitchen table. I didn't rush. Each page was its own weight. Each figure, each account, each small note in Adam's hand, it all amounted to a truth I hadn't expected to find. It wasn't just money. It was foresight. It was love written in numbers and signatures. It was the sentence he left me with. Not because people don't love you, but because money changes what love means. He knew. Somehow, he knew. That afternoon, I called Beth. Beth and I had taught at the same school 30 years ago, she in literature, me in nursing. She had gone back to law school after retiring. A quiet woman, always with a cardigan and practical shoes. She was the one person I knew who never asked too many questions. She picked up after 2 rings. "Linda," she said. "Yes," I said. "Do you have time this week?" A pause, then her voice softened. "Come tomorrow. Bring everything. I'll make coffee." I didn't ask if she meant it. I simply packed the folders. The next morning, I drove out early. Her house sat on a hill just beyond town, surrounded by leafless maples and a porch that sagged slightly on the left. I knocked, and the door opened before I could lower my hand. She hugged me gently and stepped back. "I set the big table in the sunroom," she said. "Easier to see things in the light." We didn't talk much. She brewed coffee. I unpacked the box. Then we sat. For 4 hours, Beth combed through every page. She read in silence, nodding occasionally, underlining with a pencil. She marked Nate's documents in red. She marked Adam's in blue. By noon, she had finished. She poured another cup and looked at me across the table. "This isn't guardianship," she said, pointing to Nate's paperwork. "This is takeover. If you had signed, you would have lost everything. Rights. Decisions. Your voice." She paused, then gestured to Adam's documents. "But this is protection. You're in full control. It's airtight. Whoever helped him draft this was thorough." I looked at the pen in her hand. The way it clicked quietly in her fingers. "What do I do now?" I asked. "You rewrite it all," she said. "Update the trust. Secure your decisions. Put it where no one can touch it unless you say so." And so we did. For the next 3 days, we worked slowly. She rewrote the trust in my name only, with layers of protection, no access without dual verification by doctors. No hidden clauses. No opportunities for misuse. Every angle was checked, every loophole closed. When we were done, she slid the final folder toward me. "You don't owe them explanation," she said. "Just protection. For yourself." I thanked her. Not loudly. Just with a long, quiet look that carried more than words. I didn't call Nate. I didn't tell Clara. I didn't argue or accuse. I simply moved. The new house was smaller. One garden bed, a porch swing with chipped paint, and windows that faced east. The woods behind it whispered constantly, leaves, birds, sometimes just the sound of air moving through branches. Connecticut was unfamiliar, but that suited me. I didn't want to be known. I wanted to be allowed. The first night there, I slept with the windows open. The silence wasn't empty. It had weight. Like something earned. I unpacked slowly over the next few days. One box at a time. A stack of folded towels. A set of plates I had bought myself, for once. The photo of Adam stayed in a drawer, not because I loved him less, but because I didn't need to see him to remember what he gave me. No one knew where I was. I didn't update my address. I didn't post or email. My phone stayed off for 2 weeks. The quiet became a kind of refuge, not from others, but from the version of myself I had been too long. The woman who apologized before speaking. The woman who offered before being asked. The woman who gave until nothing was left to give. She didn't live here anymore. Instead, I planted herbs in the single raised bed behind the porch. Mint. Sage. Thyme. Simple things. Things that grew slow, without noise. Things that, like me, didn't need permission. Beth mailed the final documents herself. She sealed them in an envelope with thick tape, addressed them to the trust's holding firm, and placed a small note inside, handled with care. Owner is lucid and clear. Her handwriting, small and even, reminded me of the attendance books we used to mark decades ago, when clarity had been expected, not doubted. After that, there was nothing more to say. Just quiet. The trust was now mine alone. Everything I had, Adam's legacy, the house in Vermont, the investments I never touched, tucked away behind protections no one could pierce unless I let them. And I wouldn't. Not again. I left Vermont without fanfare. I didn't tell anyone. I canceled the post office box, let the plants dry out, gave the cafe girl a quiet thank you on my last morning. She smiled but didn't ask where I was going. Just handed me my latte, no sugar. I packed only what I needed, linens, some books, the iron kettle Adam once used on camping trips. Everything else I left folded, stacked, or given away. The moving van was small. I rode behind it in my own car, following the tail lights down the highway, the trees blurring into a dark green hush. The cottage faded in the rearview mirror. Ahead, Connecticut. A town I had never heard of until Beth mentioned it. Quiet place, she said. Woods. You'd like the library. The new house was smaller than I expected. White clapboard, one story. A porch swing that creaked when I sat on it. The wood was soft at the edges, weathered. But it held. There were no fences. Just woods pressing in behind the yard, and a narrow path that disappeared into trees I hadn't yet walked through. I slept the first night on a mattress on the floor, listening to the wind shift in the branches. The silence was full, not empty. In the morning, I made toast and sat on the porch with my tea. A bird landed on the railing, studied me, then flew away. I didn't move. I didn't need to be anywhere. I didn't call Nate. I didn't leave a note. I just disappeared, the way old things do, quietly, without noise, without ceremony. By the end of the week, I found the library Beth had mentioned. It was a low brick building with ivy climbing one side. Inside, the air smelled like paper and dust. I filled out a volunteer form without thinking. The woman at the desk looked surprised but pleased. "We're short-staffed," she said. "You sure?" I nodded. "Just a few shifts. I'd like to be useful." She smiled. "Well, we can always use more hands." The work was light. Stamping returns, shelving. Sometimes just sitting near the front desk while the staff took breaks. The library was quiet, mostly. Occasionally children burst in after school, all noise and candy wrappers. But by 4, it returned to itself, a hushed place, filled with people searching silently. That's where I met June, Mary, and Anne. They came on Tuesdays, always together. Sat at the same table, read magazines, sometimes whispered over crossword puzzles. They noticed me. I noticed them. No one asked questions. Eventually, I joined them. We didn't speak about pasts. We shared tea. Sometimes seed packets. Once, I brought in banana bread and left it in the break room. Someone left a thank you card with no signature. It didn't matter who. We started tending the weedy patch behind the library. An unofficial garden ignored by the city. At first, we just pulled dandelions. Then someone brought gloves. Someone else brought tomato seedlings. We planted herbs, marigolds, and stubborn tomatoes that refused to fruit until late July. We worked slowly. In silence. Our knees in the dirt, our hands dark with soil. No music, no chatting. Just the hum of bees and the creak of old joints. We called it the quiet corner. It wasn't official. No one named it aloud. But that's what we called it, in the way we laid down tools at the same time each day. In the way we left jars of water on the bench for each other. I didn't need to prove myself there. I didn't need to be generous, helpful, or motherly. I simply was. And in that stillness, something settled. Not healed, I don't believe in sudden healing. But it calmed. The ache of being erased faded into something else. Something bearable. By September, I no longer checked my phone each morning. I didn't wait for Nate's name to appear. I didn't look at Clara's social posts. Their silence no longer hurt. It simply became another part of the weather, something you dress for, something you no longer take personally. By October, I had learned the rhythm of the house. How the floor creaked near the back door, how the faucet took a moment to warm. I liked the stillness, not the absence of sound, but the absence of demands. Nothing asked anything of me here. At the library, I took the morning shifts. That left the afternoons for the quiet corner. Mary brought basil seeds. June donated a rusty spade with initials carved into the handle. We planted late-season radishes and watered them from reused yogurt tubs. And started a compost pile behind the garden bed, and I brought a chipped bowl from home to scoop coffee grounds into it. No one directed. No one advised. We just did what needed doing. There's a kind of comfort in unspoken understanding. In showing up without expectation, in being seen without being studied. The 4 of us never exchanged life stories. We never asked what we'd lost or whom we'd left behind. We simply arrived, worked, and left with dirt on our palms and silence in our mouths. One afternoon, I found an envelope tucked between two library books. No name. Inside, a packet of sweet pea seeds and a note written in fine penmanship. For the spring. Because not everything that dies stays gone. I kept the note in the drawer by the stove. Not for sentiment, but because it didn't demand anything of me. I stopped measuring my days by who called, who didn't. I no longer checked for packages from Clara. They had stopped months ago, anyway. Whatever obligations they once pretended to feel had thinned to nothing. And I found I didn't miss them. Not the performance of family. Not the stiff smiles over too sweet wine. Not the forced laughter at jokes that made my chest tighten. What I missed, if I missed anything, was a version of myself that had believed those things meant love. In December, the tomatoes finally died back. Frost took the marigolds. We cut everything down together, laying the stalks gently over the compost. No one said, next year. But we all knew. I spent Christmas alone. By choice. I didn't bake. I didn't decorate. I didn't write cards. I made tea and watched the river, thinner now, edged with white. At some point, I pulled out the photo of Adam I'd packed in the linen drawer. I didn't place it on the mantel. I held it for a while, then slid it under the corner of a book I wasn't reading. I whispered, "It's quiet now." The words felt like a sentence spoken to the house itself. To the season. To whoever might be listening that wasn't Nate, or Clara, or the woman I used to be. The first week of January, I found a note at the library desk. "Linda, call me when you can." It was in Nate's handwriting. I folded it and put it in my coat pocket. I didn't call. Instead, I walked home the long way, past the post office and down toward the footbridge where the geese gathered. The cold pinched my cheeks, but I kept going. At home, I took off my shoes at the door, wiped down the counter, and lit a candle, not for warmth, but for the flicker. The note stayed in my coat pocket for 2 weeks. Then one morning, as I stood outside the quiet corner with a bag of compost in my hand, I reached for my gloves and felt it there, worn at the fold, soft from friction. I didn't open it again. I burned it in the fireplace that night, watched the edges curl, the ink vanish. Not in anger. Just indecision. Whatever he wanted to say, it had come too late. He had spoken when it was easy. He had grown silent when it mattered. And now, I had grown silent too, not in retreat, but in resistance. That night, I slept through without waking. No dreams. No ache. Just quiet. And it was enough. It was early spring when he came. I was weeding the patch behind the library, coaxing out the last of the crabgrass, when June said, "There's someone waiting for you at the front." I didn't ask who. I wiped my hands on the towel tied to my waist and walked back through the side door. The hallway smelled like old books and dusted windows. Familiar now. Then I saw him. Nate. He was sitting on the porch steps, the same way he used to sit as a boy after his bike rides. His sweatshirt was too big, sleeves pulled over his hands. At his feet, a plain white envelope. His eyes found me, then looked away. "Hi, Mom," he said, voice quiet. He stood, then sat again, unsure. I stayed by the door. The wind moved between us. Not cold, but not warm either. He didn't offer a hug. He didn't try to step forward. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't know what we were doing. Things got away from us. From me." His voice cracked, and he looked down at the envelope. Things didn't go how I expected." He didn't say Clara's name. I noticed that. I didn't respond right away. There's a kind of silence that isn't avoidance. It's preparation. A clearing of space. After a long moment, I said, "I forgive you." He looked up, startled, hopeful. But I continued, "Forgiveness doesn't come with a key." He blinked. Some doors, once closed, take time, I said. If they ever open again. I wasn't angry. I wasn't cruel. Just tired of being the only one knocking. He didn't argue. Just nodded, slow and hollow. Then he placed the envelope beside me on the step. It's not money, he said, almost smiling. I know better now. I didn't reach for it. He stood. His sweatshirt caught the wind. He looked older than I remembered. Not just in years, in the way people look after loss. Or regret. I'll go, he said. I just wanted you to know I still think about you. I nodded. That was all. He walked down the path without looking back. The gravel under his shoes crunched like soft applause. I watched until he turned the corner. Then I sat where he'd been and looked at the envelope. I didn't open it. Not right away. I let it sit on my lap, light and unassuming. Whatever it held, it couldn't change what had already happened. He had returned. He had spoken. But I had stopped waiting. That was the difference now. I stood and walked back inside the library, past the desk, past the quiet corner, into the little side room where we kept the gardening gloves and trowels. I placed the envelope in the drawer beside the seed packets and closed it gently. If it waited, it would wait in silence. Just like I had.